Hi, welcome to Active Aging. I'm your host, Danielle Procopio. On our show, we explore different resources throughout the community that are helpful as we age. Today, I have Amy Miklandric joining us from Grace Hospice, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the hospice benefit and how it might benefit us at home.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here,
I'm excited to be here.
So how long have you been with Grace Hospice?
I've been with Grace for 4 years, but I've worked in the hospice realm for over 18 now.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge to share then.
I hope so. Yeah,
absolutely. So if you could just start us out by maybe telling us a little bit about what hospice is.
Sure. Hospice is a philosophy. It's not a place. So a lot of people believe that you have to go somewhere to get hospice services. Hospice actually focuses on comfort care and on the quality of life. So it focuses also on symptom management. So if you need hospice services, you can have them wherever you call home.
Okay. And typically when we're looking at hospice, that is for someone that is going to have some type of terminal diagnosis. Is that correct?
Right.
So how does someone know that they're eligible? At what point, does that become an issue where hospice might be able to be called in?
Sure. Hospice is used and referred to when a patient has an illness, a terminal illness, that is no longer seeking aggressive treatment. So if you're somebody that has an illness that is covered by hospice care and you need that care in the home, you can be eligible for hospice services.
Okay. And I think that when we say hospice, it's sometimes a dirty word in healthcare because it is a scary word and people associate it, with, I'm sure, a lot of fear of end of life. And I think there's a lot of myths that are out there about hospice. So now that you've kind of told us a little bit about what hospice is, I kind of want to talk a little bit more about what it isn't.
Okay.
So, typically when people think of hospice, they think that means that they have to be ready to die and that they have to be ready to give up. And from what I'm understanding, that's not the case.
No. With hospice care, actually, it's about living. Hospice is about living, and it's about living the way you want to live. So when there is no curative treatment available for an individual, hospice is called in, and we focus on quality of life and comfort care. So we are there to provide support to the patient, to the family, in their own home setting, and do the things that they want to do at their end of life. We have many patients that are on hospice for longer than 2-3 years. It just depends on the decline of that individual patient. And it kind of brings me into the next point where, as far as eligibility, we are required by Medicare, and Medicare guidelines hospice, and we're required by Medicare to have a doctor sign an order to bring somebody onto hospice care. And what that doctor is saying is that person has 6 months or less to live if the disease process follows its normal course.
Okay.
And that's kind of where we can, deviate, and that's how patients are on longer than 6 months, because you and I might have the same disease process, but yours is a little faster or slower than mine. So in order to have that, we're able to keep patients on longer because we recertify them every so often. And as long as they show some sort of decline, we can bring them on our care and keep them on our care.
Sure. So when you're talking about different disease processes, I, for the longest time, thought hospice was only for cancer patients. Mm-hmm. So is that the case?
No, not at all.
Okay.
In the past, that was your first thought. Well, if you had cancer and it was something that wasn't curable and there was no more treatment available, that hospice was your choice. But nowadays, what we're finding is hospice covers a lot more diagnoses, not just cancer.
Sure.
We are looking at congestive heart failure or end-stage COPD, even your ALS, end-stage ALS, or your MS, end-stage renal disease, Alzheimer's, protein cow malnutrition. There's just so many diagnoses that are covered under hospice. And along with that major and that primary diagnosis, there are also other diagnoses that support that hospice diagnosis. So it's very feasible for somebody that, as an elderly person, maybe in their 90s, that has maybe just protein cow malnutrition, where they're losing weight and they're just not thriving as well as they were, but they also have many comorbidities. Mm-hmm. So we have those all together, and then we're able to bring that patient onto hospice care.
Yeah, because unfortunately, we're all going to die at some point, and not all deaths are sudden or surprises. Some of them are after a long decline. Mm-hmm. And so, depending on what your sickness is or which organ, is failing you essentially, then, once you get to a certain point, then hospice is able to come in.
Right.
So once hospice does come in, Amy, for whatever is wrong with me, do I have to stop taking my medications? Do I have to stop all my treatments?
No, you don't.
Okay.
We at Grace Hospice, we don't take our patients off their medicines when they come onto service.
Okay.
We look at what's working for them. We are very it's important to us to make sure that each of our patients have an individualized care plan. So when you're coming on hospice care, we want to make sure you're having what works for you. So we look through your medicines, we work with your primary care physician and see what's working best for you, and then introduce things as needed. So we don't always bring in those comfort meds that people are scared of sometimes. You know, people talk about the morphine and those types of things, and if we have a patient that we admit that isn't ready for those types of medicines and don't need them at this point, we don't bring them in initially.
Sure.
Our nurse is kind of working on that relationship with the patient and family and introducing those meds as they see fit.
Okay, very good. So with all these medications and the nurse and all these things that you're talking about, what's covered by hospice?
Sure.
So what exactly is going to be included if I am going to sign on to hospice?
Well, hospice is covered by Medicare. It was actually in 1986, it was brought to Congress and it was permanently approved as the Medicare hospice benefit. So at that point, Medicare guidelines us. So all the hospices are guidelined by Medicare. Even though I think we all provide our services a little differently. So that's kind of why we're talking today and just letting people know that on hospice, even though all the services we're going to talk about each hospice provides, it's important to get the information from each hospice to see who you choose to come into your home and provide that care to you.
And to see how they would interpret those services.
Absolutely.
Sure.
With hospice care, you receive nursing in the home. Usually nursing is a couple times a week to start, and then depending on what you need in the future, they can increase to 5 days a week or perhaps decrease if you only need them once a week. There is also home health aid services that are available for personal care. You can have a volunteer if you'd like. Hospices have volunteers that give of their time to give a little respite to the caregiver. You know, they're in the home, they're providing non-medical care, but they're there to kind of give that caregiver a break and kind of do the things that they need to do on a daily basis. Also, there's a social worker available with hospice, and they're there to guide you, maybe if you need a living will or a power of attorney or any type of those documents available, but also they can connect you with any outside resources in the community. And then finally, we have a chaplain that's available for any spiritual concerns. So it's just kind of a whole group of individuals. We work together. We're led by a hospice medical director. And, you know, we meet on a biweekly basis to talk about all of our patients to make sure they're getting exactly what they need.
Okay, and you may have already said this, so if you did, I apologize for asking. But as far as medications, equipment, things like that, are those supplies or any of those things covered by hospice?
They are. In addition to the medicines that we talked about, also any of the supplies that the patient needs, any medical equipment they need in the home, any type of medicines that are related to the diagnosis or perhaps medicines that are needed in the future to do with nausea or anything like that, hospice covers for and pays for all those too. So a lot of times people don't realize that it could be a financial reason that they come onto hospice, but at the same time, Medicare felt it's a great idea and people want to be in their own homes when end-of-life care happens. You know, they want to do what they want to do, they want to be in their own bed, they want to lay with their grandkids, they want to lay in bed with their dog, you know, whatever it is they want to do, you can do that by electing hospice care because now we're coming to you. We're guests in your home or wherever you call home. Hospice goes into nursing facilities, goes into assisted livings. Hospice can provide services in hospitals, settings, anywhere the patient calls home. So.
Great. Yeah, and I'm sure sometimes that setting can change as well. So you might start at home and then end up somewhere else, but hospice can follow.
Absolutely.
So that's good. And I know that it's governed by Medicare and the Medicare benefit, but you are able to utilize hospice if you have other payer sources as well, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so Medicaid works with many private insurances.
What happens with, especially with Medicaid, is it resorts back to your Medicare, to traditional Medicare. So it's covered, you know, absolutely. And then most private insurances have a hospice benefit. If they don't, we would let our patient know maybe they have a deductible or they have some sort of copay. It's very minimal. Usually in the 18 years that I've been doing this, it's only come up 2 times where we've had a patient that needed that. And then we have the option too of accepting a patient regardless of their source of payment.
Perfect. Yeah, I know that because not everyone dies after the age of 65.
Right.
So sometimes if they're on the younger side, then it's good to know that most insurance companies have adopted some type of hospice benefit as well. Very good.
Yes.
So you told us a little bit about what to expect. When is the right time to call hospice and start exploring that?
Sure.
When should someone start asking about hospice?
Once they have, they're diagnosed with a terminal illness or a life-limiting illness, that there is no more treatment to be sought. Perhaps that they've tried every treatment they can, or perhaps they're not responding to the treatments or anything like that. That's when hospice can be called in. As long as you have that life-limiting illness, hospice, you're eligible for hospice care. we can provide services as much as little or as you want. And what it kind of allows you to do then is take control a little bit of your care to get back to the way it used to be when the physicians used to, visit the homes and we took care of everything and we knew our doctor for 40 years and that kind of thing. But nowadays we want to get back to that. And we work with a lot of individuals where their family lives out of state. So to know, it's a peace of mind for those loved ones out of state because they know somebody is checking in on their loved one and we are working together to make sure they're getting what they need.
Very good. And I think a lot of people are surprised, and maybe even some of our viewers have not heard of Grace Hospice before, but there are several hospice providers, I know at least in the Tri-County area, and I think we're up to 17 was the latest count that I had heard. And then of course over in Pennsylvania, there's a whole other set of hospices that they are working with as well. So those are quite a bit to choose from. So how does someone decide which of the 17 hospices to work with? Because I'm sure you don't all do things the same way.
Right, exactly. And I think the most important thing is obviously, ask your provider, ask your doctor if they have somebody maybe they've worked with. Or maybe you have a family member that used a hospice that they were, happy to work with too, and you would want to go on service with them. But most importantly, my goal in the community as community liaison is to get the information out there to individuals and let them know they have a choice. So of those 17 hospices, I encourage you to call those hospices that you hear of, or perhaps, a few of them in the phone book, whatever it might be. Call 3 or 4 of them. They all have an individual like myself available to come to the family, to talk to you, to answer questions. You don't have to sign up for their care. You can just get all of your ducks in a row and then make an educated decision. So it's just very important to kind of get your, talk to your provider now. A lot of the doctors in the area, Medicare's given them a chance now to talk with their patients about end-of-life care. And they can bill Medicare for that visit, that office visit. So it's a nice thing that if you are with a doctor for many years and you're comfortable talking with them, meet with your family, meet with your physician, talk about your wishes. And that's really most important, is to let your family know what your wishes are and then take the steps before you're in crisis to come on to hospice care.
Absolutely. That could be a whole other show where we could talk about all the steps that you need to take to prepare for those types of urgent situations so that you have your family on board. But, it is good to know that there are those hospices out there to choose from. Amy, is there anything that viewers should look for in a hospice?
Sure.
Because are there key traits that you want to look for in a provider that you're going to work with?
You do. You want to make sure that they're Medicare certified. So we are guidelined by Medicare, but you have to be certified by Medicare as well. We are also at Grace, we're certified by CHAP, which is Community Health Accreditation Program, which some hospitals you might be familiar are with JACO, those types of things. So you want to make sure that you're accredited by something. All hospices can be looked up on the internet if you're savvy, and seen what they're doing in the community and what their surveys have been returned. Medicare actually sends surveys out anonymously to the patients of hospice, regardless of what hospice you're with. And after that loved one passes away, the family receives a survey. And we are looking, at hospice to make sure that we've met all of your goals and to met all your needs. And so it's important to make sure to look and do that research prior to for accepting somebody. You want to make sure that hospice is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At Grace, we pride ourselves in the fact if we have somebody calling in after hours, that our nurses are ready to make a visit. We don't care if it's the weekend. We don't care if it's in the middle of the night or a holiday. That's what our nurses and our staff are there to do. And we want to make sure that we support that family and patient no matter when it is. So those are things to kind of look for to make sure that's available to you. As we mentioned earlier, all of your supplies and your medicines are covered by hospice. So you want to make sure that that's the case. Most importantly, I tell families, have a list of your goals. Every family has different goals. Every patient has different goals. And that's your goals, and that's fine. But you want to make sure that you're meeting with the hospice and you're talking about them and you're voicing your goals. So this way you can see if they meet those or not.
So Amy, after you talk with the different hospices and kind of figure out which one is appropriate for you, what's the next step? Where do we go from there?
The next step, if you haven't already talked to your physician, you want to let them know that you're choosing a hospice.
Okay.
And then only that just helps the hospice out, because then when we call the doctor's office to get that order for hospice and perhaps get your history and physical and your last visit notes and those types of things to help us, they're aware of your choice. And so what we do then is we do call the doctor's office. We ask our primary care physician, your primary care physician, if they'd like to follow you on our care. So we don't necessarily at Grace make you come over to our medical director. We give you that choice, and some physicians will follow and some won't. In the case they don't, our medical director is available to follow you on our care. We then request that information we need from the doctor's office, and then what we do is we call the family and we schedule a visit with the patient and family to do that admission visit. The admission visit, I would say, takes 2 to 3 hours. It does involve with physical assessment and a lot of questions and consents and explanations of things by the nurse, and just making sure everybody's on the same page at that point. But after we do that, we schedule the admission, we come in, we do the admission, and then you're seen periodically according to what your care plan comes up with.
Very good. And then we talked a little bit about that certification process. So typically people are on for 3 months before you actually start that recertification process. Is that correct?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
We start with a 90-day certification period, and then an additional 90-day certification period, and then you have unlimited 60-day certification periods. So at the end of all those certification periods, what we're doing is we're looking at our nurses' notes, we're looking at our medical director notes, anything that pertains to your care to make sure that you're still qualifying for hospice services. Okay. And as long as there's some sort of small decline, I know our nurses are very good at documenting, those declines and those changes in that individual to make sure that they can continue receiving hospice.
That's very good, because a lot of times you hear these stories where people are on for so long and you wonder, how did that happen? And then of course on the flip side, there's people that are on for a very short amount of time, but it's good to know that that care's there once you decide that it's time to elect it.
Right, and we encourage people to come on to hospice sooner. I mean, I know that's one of the things people think, that hospice care is only for the very, very end of life. It's not. We want to become part of your family, I guess is what we kind of say. Our mission statement states that, we want to treat every one of our patients as our own treasured loved ones, and we do. We want to treat them as if we treat our own mom or our dad or our grandma or our grandpa. And so we want to build the relationship with the patient and the family. It alleviates a lot of stressors too if you do that, where you're not coming onto hospice in crisis. You are coming on sooner, so then you can build a relationship with your nurse. You get to know them, they get to know you, they get to know your pain tolerance, what you're comfortable with, and then the family's more comfortable asking questions. And you get to have a more peaceful time and a more peaceful death, really.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really important too. I think that, of course, hospice is for the patient, and it's all about making sure that they're comfortable, but this is also such a wonderful resource for the family, as well as for the caregivers, because it's not always that we're staying with our family. Sometimes we have caregivers there, and to know that there's that resource there and there's that person to call to answer any questions or to come out if there is a medical emergency, that's very generous of the benefit.
It is.
And I do believe that grief support is typically offered for families as well.
It is. Okay. Traditionally, hospice provides bereavement support, and that lasts 13 months after your loved one passes away.
Wow.
We reach out to whichever family members want the bereavement. It doesn't necessarily have to be that one caregiver. It could even be a paid caregiver that was in there taking care of the patient for months and years. They want to be part of the bereavement. We bereave and we help anybody through that process that needs it. In addition, we also have a bereavement program and a grief program where we have an individual that heads that up at Grace, and they're available to families to have, if they have anticipatory grief. So perhaps they're grieving before that loved one passes away, or they have, maybe the patient's in a facility and the staff at that facility needs some extra care and they need help dealing with this patient and their grief. So our services are available too to that resource.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, because I mean, if you are in a facility, an assisted living or skilled, that staff does get attached to residents if they've been there long term. So what a wonderful resource for those staff members as well.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. So Amy, not everyone's going to be appropriate for hospice. Not everyone that you meet with is going to be ready to make that decision, and maybe they don't meet your criteria. Maybe they're not sick enough yet for hospice. So when those types of things happen, there's still assistance needed in the home setting, wherever they might be. What are some resources that families and people can call on at that point in time if hospice isn't the right decision?
Sure. What we look at is if a patient comes to us and needs a hospice evaluation, and that's most important, like even if you feel that you're kind of on the bubble, like you're teetering, you're not really sure what you want to do yet, you can ask your doctor to give us a hospice evaluation order. And then all that means is then the nurse comes in, does an evaluation, sees where you meet criteria, maybe where you don't, and then alerts the family or the patient on what we're looking for to make you hospice eligible.
Okay.
But if you don't meet the criteria for hospice at at that time, there is something we hear a lot about, palliative care. And palliative care means comfort care. So in your minds, hospice care is comfort care, is palliative care. The only difference between palliative care and hospice care is palliative care is used when you're still seeking aggressive treatment. And palliative care manages your symptoms, so your pain, those types of things, intermittently while you are still seeking those aggressive treatments.
Okay.
Once you stop those treatments, that's when hospice care can come in play. And we still provide that comfort care and that managing of symptoms, but we do it under the hospice benefit.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times palliative care comes up in discussions, and it's really important for people to realize that hospice is more of a well-rounded experience, I think, as opposed to palliative care. Whereas palliative you can use at any point in the illness. It is just looking at the symptoms and trying to control them, whereas hospice really looks at the whole person.
Right.
So I think that sometimes, those palliative care and hospice are used interchangeably, and it's not always appropriate. So I appreciate that you've explained that. And then what about home health? How do you differ from home health? When is it a better time to be on home health versus hospice?
Your home health services, keep in mind that they are for a certain period of time. So they always have a beginning date and an end date. Their goal at home health, obviously, is to get you better. There's a goal to get better and to have an end result to discharge you. With hospice care versus home care you're required to be homebound too. So it's very hard for you to get to the doctor, very hard for you to get anywhere. They're looking for you to be homebound so they can come in and provide those services to you in your own home. With hospice care, you don't have to be homebound. So if you have an illness that is not treatable, maybe you tried home care, maybe you had home care for a short period of time, and that home care nurse is seeing that you just need some more help and you're just not bouncing back the way you were, or perhaps your goals aren't being met like you thought they would. They might suggest hospice care to you, because hospice care is kind of that other layer than if you have an illness that's not curable and you've exhausted your other efforts.
Okay. Yeah, so it's good to know there's a multitude of resources out there as we age and as we're seeing different illnesses that we can get some help at home, wherever that home setting might be.
Right.
So just depending on whether it's time for home health or palliative care or hospice, there's a couple of options that are out there.
There is, yes.
Very good. Something that I wanted you to talk with us a little bit about today, Amy, and this is something that's more Grace focused. It's not necessarily all hospices, but I know that the National Association for Palliative Care had put forth the We Honor Veterans program several years ago, and it was really a way for hospices to connect with the veterans in the community. And all hospices have the option to participate in the program, but not all do.
Right.
But I know that Grace not only has decided to be a part of that program, but you've really made it almost a part of your mission, and you're very proud of what you've done. So could you tell us a little bit about what your relationship is like with the veteran community and how that program works?
Sure, I'd love to. First of all, we hold our veterans in very high regard in this area, especially in this Mahoning Valley. It seems like we're very inundated with veterans that served our country, and thank you for your service if you are a veteran. At Grace, what it means to be part of that We Honor Veterans program is that we've put forth the effort to contact that National Hospice and Palliative Care organization and go through the steps to become a We Honor Veterans partner. And it just means that. It means we partnered with the VA in our area. We partnered not only with the clinics in our area, but the veteran service organizations too, so where they receive their benefits from.
Right.
So we're working with them, we're meeting with them. We're also training our staff at Grace to know the difference of end-of-life issues with a veteran versus a civilian. They're different.
Sure.
They're very different. And depending on their service connection and if they were in wartime or if they weren't, those types of things come up at the end of life. And our nurses are trained on different ways or perhaps different medicines or different trigger points to kind of know what to anticipate with a veteran. We're also able to navigate that VA system for them. So if they come into our care at Grace under our hospice benefit, we're able to go to the VA for them. We can physically go in there, drop information off to them to make sure they're getting the benefits that they receive at the end of life. There's something called aid and attendance benefits that the VA provides to our veterans, and it could be used for certain things, caregivers in the home possibly. If they're service connected enough with our VA, they can have these services and have these provided in their home. So a lot of times it's just having somebody physically go for you and take that care of you. We are in the VA a lot. We do a lot of partnerships, a lot of outreach programs with the VA. Our volunteer program is involved with the outreach services in the area too. So we think it's important. We're finding that the VA is focusing a little more too on the end-of-life care of veterans. So hand in hand, we're able to work together to make sure they get the best care.
Absolutely. And the entire system can sometimes be very overwhelming if it's your first time trying to get in and claim any type of benefit or kind of navigate the VA system. So what a wonderful resource you are for the community to kind of help walk them through that process. And we're very lucky in this area because, we have great people that work at our service commissions to also help.
Yes.
But it is nice to kind of have that connection from a medical side to introduce them there. So thank you for your service to our veterans. We appreciate everything Grace does.
You're welcome.
So I know there's other resources that Grace provides as well. So are there any other resources or events that are coming up that we might want to let our viewers know about?
Sure. One thing I wanted to mention is our volunteer program is looking to grow. So our volunteer coordinator is looking for new volunteers.
Fantastic.
And to be a hospice volunteer, you can have any time to give. It doesn't have to be a lengthy period of time. It can be a couple hours a week. And you have your choice too. You don't necessarily have to go be with a patient if you want. If you wanted to do administrative duties, you can do that in our office and help with things such as our memorial service or upcoming events that we have planned. But it's just a simple volunteer training they go through. We're looking for volunteers in Mahoning, Trumbull, and Columbiana counties. And you need to be able to drive to the patient's homes and get transportation there. But other than that, it's just having the time to give. You'll receive proper training and background checked and that kind of thing, and to make sure that you're safe when you're going into the patient's home and they're safe having you.
And is there a minimum number of hours that I would need to volunteer during the month, or are you happy to have me for one versus 20?
We're happy to have you for one.
Okay,
there's always that family that's looking for something specific, and if we can match you up with somebody that is, has the same goals as you, it'd be a wonderful fit.
Very good. And do I have to have previous hospice experience in order to be a volunteer with Grace?
Absolutely not.
Okay, very good. Well, hopefully some of our viewers are looking for some ways to fill some time, and they'll be able to come and help out with some of your patients.
And I just wanted to mention too that we're also doing our memorial service. We do a memorial service annually, and it's open to all of those patients' families that we had on service within the past year. And we're holding ours in December this year. We kind of wanted to gear it more towards the holidays.
Okay.
Because I know that's difficult.
And if I am grieving, am I able to come to the service even if I haven't had someone on?
You can.
Okay,
you
very
can.
good. So if we want to get more information about that or attend, how would we go about finding out more, Amy?
You would just contact our office, and our phone number is 330-729-2924.
Very good. So I know that we've covered quite a bit in our time. But so just in summary, if you wanted to leave our viewers with something to remember about hospice, what would be the most important thing you think that you've told us today?
I feel that you should do your research. Don't be scared to call a hospice up, ask for information, ask for somebody like myself to come and talk to you, whether it's over the phone or in person. We're here for you, and we want to make sure that the transition is as easy as it can be. So.
Absolutely, and to have a service like this to make that transition a little bit easier, both for the patient and the family, so critical. So we thank you for everything that you do. If I want to learn more information, Amy, or maybe if I want to have you come out and talk to myself or someone in my family, how would I go about doing that? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way is to call our office at Grace Hospice. We're located at 7206 Market Street in Youngstown. And our phone number is 330-729-2924.
Okay, and do you have a website that we're able to visit as well?
We do. You can go to www.ghospice.com.
Very good. Very good. Anything else you want to leave us with today?
No, I think everything's okay.
You've told us everything we need to know.
I think I've spilled my guts,
Thank you so much for all of the information. Again, there's multiple hospices that we can utilize in this area, but make sure you talk with a couple of different agencies in order to make sure you find the right fit for you. So, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Very good. Until next month, we appreciate you spending your time with us and watching this episode of Active Aging. Have a great day.